What is up, everyone? It's Skill Up here. The testing on the PTS continues, and today I'd like to have a really detailed look at the new Lone Star gear set, which I think is getting a bit of a bum rap out in the community at the moment. I streamed on Twitch last night, which is something I do very rarely, and while I was doing it, I used Lone Star the entire time, and I did some more tests this morning, and I'm of a view that this is actually a really cool, really well-designed gear set, but it absolutely needs a buff for a variety of reasons that I'm going to take you through right now. And there's also some serious risks that I see associated in the PvP space, but I'll just comment on those briefly. So, what is classified Lone Star? Well, the 5-piece bonus is going to give you an additional 50% ammo, which you really don't need. You well and truly have enough ammo at this point anyway, but it also gives you 8% LMG damage and 8% shotgun damage. Now, this is a big deal. 8% is a fairly large value in the overall economy of this game at this point. It's a very, very, very competitive 5-piece bonus versus many of the other ones that you're going to be seeing. So already this set is doing fairly well, given the fact that it's going to jack your LMG and shotgun damage by a pretty chunky amount. The 6-piece bonus is a little complex. I'll read it out for you. When a weapon has 25% of its magazine remaining, right, so you're in the last quarter of your magazine, there's a 50% chance to receive a bonus that activates when the final bullet is fired from the current magazine. So when you're in the last quarter of your bullets, there's a 50-50 chance that you're going to get a buff, and that buff activates when you run out of bullets. Once activated, the magazine is instantly refilled, weapon damage is increased by 15%, fire rate is increased by 25%, and stability and accuracy are decreased by 15%. The bonus is cancelled by reloading or exiting combat. So in practical terms, what will happen is that you'll fire your last bullet and immediately your magazine is refilled. You're going to start firing faster, you're going to do more damage, but your gun is going to be harder to control. It's a pretty awesome idea. It's almost like a mini tactical link that activates 50% of the time when you are playing correctly. But to really get the most out of this set, you do need to play in a very specific way and with a very specific loadout, but we'll get to that in a moment. The first thing I'll say is that the numbers do stack up on this. Yes, you are doing 15% more damage and you are firing 25% faster, which is a huge increase in DPS while this thing is active. I can say though that the changes to accuracy and stability are bugged at this point. In particular, the accuracy debuff that's provided actually changes per weapon type. If I'm using an RPK like the Pecan, you can see that my reticle gets a little bit larger, but it's still somewhat manageable. That looks like a 15% decrease in accuracy to me. However, when I'm using my MG5, which is one of the belt-fed variants of that weapon, my reticle blows up to gigantic proportions and the gun becomes completely unusable at that point. I'm unsure if this is a design choice that the developers have taken to debuff the MG5 and the other belt-fed LMGs in this way to balance them. This is absolutely useless when you are using it with an MG5. I would never do it with that. Right now, it's only useful with the L86 or the RPK LMG variants. The other thing I'll say is that I did test this with shotguns, and I must say it just doesn't work with shotgun. You get this huge rate of fire and you're doing this bonus damage, but the shotgun becomes so hard to control at that bonus RPM that it's just not valuable. Maybe if there's some sort of cheesy SASG mouse scroll wheel or controller auto fire thing where you're able to push out even more burst damage with it, cool. But if you're doing that anyway, the SASG is already spitting out so many pellets at once that the extra 25% bonus isn't going to give you a huge amount of benefit. Personally, I think this gear set just doesn't work with shotguns because the RPM just makes shotguns too unwieldy. I think this 6-piece bonus is almost exclusively designed for LMGs. So let's talk about how to cheese this 6-piece bonus, particularly in PvP where I definitely see it being a bit of a risk. The way the Berserker buff works is that it actually has two components. The first buff appears when you only have 25% of your magazine left. If it procs, great. You can actually just sit on it and then wait for the next time you encounter a player in PvP. When you do and you fire those remaining bullets, you know you are going to go berserk and you are probably going to melt that person because you're going to be dealing a huge amount of damage when that happens. Now this obviously is really great and really fun because it means you're going to be able to basically blow someone up whenever you choose to, but I'm not sure that that's what the design intent of this set is. I can't confidently say whether or not it's overpowered in PvP because A, I don't PvP very much, and B, I couldn't actually PvP on the PTS. I couldn't get any games in Last Stand. But I will say though that a gear set that allows you to basically choose when you get 15% bonus damage and 25% bonus fire rate whenever you like, on top of the extra 16% LMG damage that this gear set is already giving you, I do feel like that is probably going to be some sort of risk, especially when it's combined with things like Tactical Link or Competent or any other number of damage boosts. So that's the risk on the PvP side. Let's talk about how it fares in PvE. Now I must say a lot of people don't like the fact that this is a random proc chance on this gear set, and I must say I totally disagree with that. I understand fully that people like to know that something is reliable and that it's always going to proc, but as a student of many RPGs over many years, I'm very used to proc-based talents that force you to respond to them in interesting ways. If I always know that something is going to happen, I'm always going to play exactly the same way. But when something is unexpected and I need to keep an eye out for it and I need to respond to it when it happens, that's a skill cap factor for me that I really value and really enjoy. Furthermore, I feel like when it does proc, it actually is giving me a lot of bonus power. And the fact that I can sort of control its procking by emptying my magazine and waiting for the first Berserker buff to appear means that I can actually greatly increase the chance that I'm going to get a proc happening. So overall, I fully understand people don't like this. Personally, I do though, and I think it has a very high skill cap associated with it that I really enjoyed playing. More than something like Striker, which basically just made me feel really powerful, the Lone Star gear set forced me to play very differently, and I always like when gear sets make me play differently, because I believe that's the heart and soul of a looter shooter, at least on the PvE side. You want gear sets and builds that change up your playstyle, because if you're always killing the exact same stuff, you at least want to be killing it in different ways. However, we need to face facts that this gear set is definitely underpowered, especially when compared to Strikers. I did a video on Strikers recently in its broken form and basically said that yeah, this thing is broken, it needs to be fixed, but it also made the player feel really powerful and gave them a lot of survivability, especially when playing solo. Lone Star gear set straight up does not do that. This is a simply inferior gear set to Strikers. There's just no two ways about it. And I actually found myself at one point soloing a challenge mode, getting kind of bored of how I needed to play really carefully, and then just putting on Strikers. And that's the new Strikers, by the way. That's not the old broken Strikers, it's the new one. And even the new one makes content way stronger. So my answer to this is not to nerf Strikers, but to in fact buff this Lone Star gear set so it provides some sort of comparable power to what Strikers is providing. And I wouldn't say it needs to provide lots of solo player power, but it would be really awesome if it brought some team utility. I really don't see any reason why this Berserker buff wouldn't also apply to your teammates in PvE. It would be absolutely awesome if I was running with someone who was giving me regular Berserker buffs while we were playing together. Like, that would be amazing. I would love that. And obviously, if you could somehow figure it out so it doesn't activate in the Dark Zone or in Last Stand, I really don't see why that's so problematic. It would turn this very situational, very solo, sort of selfish gear set into something that would bring a huge amount of utility to groups. I don't know, it's just my personal opinion. I do think this needs a buff, but I don't think it needs a buff in the way that it needs to compete with Striker as a solo player gear set. I think it would be great if it brought more utility to the team, and I think sharing that Berserker buff is a really good way to do that. Finally, I want to talk about the different ways that you can use this gear set and the ways that you can build with it, because I think it's really interesting. There's two options that you can go with. The first is to run with the belt-fed LMGs like the M60s or the M249 or even the MG5, which has a smaller magazine. And you would basically dump your magazine until you're into the last quarter and then hope that you would get a proc and then off you'd go, right? And when you do that, you're going to have like 200 bullets that are firing faster and that are firing at more damage, right? That's a really good way to do it. But it is requiring you to spend a lot of time walking around emptying your magazine, increasing the chances that you get procs. The way that I prefer to play this gear set as I've been testing it is actually with the RPK or the Pecan or the L86, and the reason for that is because they have much smaller magazines. And in fact, I don't run extended magazines on this gear set. I actually run the high velocity or the critical strike chance mags, because basically I want to be hitting the last 25% of my magazine more often. I want more chance to fish for procs while I'm playing with this gear set. So rather than going for those big weapons with extended magazines and spending all this time firing into thin air hoping for procs, I'm actually going for procs every sort of 5 to 10 seconds as I'm constantly emptying the magazines and switching between these two weapons very rapidly. That's a personal preference thing though. I know a lot of people like using the M60s and the like with that Lone Star gear set, but I really feel like this is the best way to play it, in particular in PvP, where you want more situational weapons that provide better burst damage and you want to be able to dip into that proc more regularly. Anyway, that's my view on the Lone Star gear set. I think that it's actually a really well designed gear set in terms of how it makes the player play differently, but I understand that a lot of people won't like that. I do think it's a bit risky in PvP given the fact that I can choose when this activates and I can essentially prime it ahead of a PvP engagement. I think on the PvE side it makes me feel really good when it works, however the simple fact is it's just nowhere near as good as Strikers, and if it's ever going to see some use I really think it needs to be buffed, and I think the best way to do that is to actually share that Berserker buff with other teammates, so long as it's not in a PvP environment, because that's going to get pretty crazy. Anyway, I'm going through all the gear sets, testing them one by one at the moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this gear set. Do you think it's where it needs to be? Do you think it needs buffs? Do you think that the buff that I'm proposing is the right one, or would you propose something else? Let me know in the comments below, and obviously make sure you tweet to Massive and post up on the forums and on Reddit. They need our feedback so that they can make the best possible patch that they can. Guys, I really hope that console players out there get into the PTS. I know that there's 10,000 invites per console. I said 5,000 last time. Apologies for that. I was wrong. It is 10,000 per, and I really hope that everyone who wants an invite gets one. For now, guys, if you liked the video, do drop it a like. Be sure to subscribe for more Division coverage. Take good care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.